Ask the Podcast Coach for October 3rd, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you, and happy Thanksgiving Proclamation Day, by the way. Today, 1863, the then President Abraham Lincoln declared Thanksgiving would be the fourth Thursday, here in the United States anyways, the fourth Thursday of every month. Why that's important? Because Black Friday would follow next.
Oh, that's right.
Right? Are you starting to prep for your Black Friday? Starting to look kind of like, hey, what kind of things am I going to look for on Black Friday?
Well, I know that they've already October, I want to say 13th and 14th is Prime Day.
Yeah.
So
that really was what kicks off the Black Friday season. I'm going to call it that. That, by the way, no one's ever done that before. I'm now declaring a Black Friday season because everybody does it, right? For like a month, maybe two. Everybody's talking about Black Friday. You know what also is black? Is this coffee pour. So let's talk a little bit. Here we go. Dave, who's sponsoring the pour?
The pour, of course, is brought to you by the one and only Mark over at podcastbranding.co. I'm going to see if I can do this. Can we put, now that I've got something white in the corner? Ooh, look at that.
Oh, that looks better.
That's exciting. Hey, Mark, number one, Mark's a great podcaster. He's been podcasting for a while, but he's been doing graphic artistry forever. He's been doing it a very long time, award-winning, and it's so easy. If you want anything to look great, whether it's new artwork, if you need a logo, if I guess I could get my talking points out of the shot, that would be good too. Jeez Louise.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
But if you need a lead magnet, if you need a book, anything that you want to look great, it's super easy. It's a 3-step process. Number one, you go over, you talk to Mark at podcastbranding.co. Tell him what you want. Tell him what you're looking for. Tell him about your podcast. He really wants to know the details because he wants to make sure it fits. And then number two, he gets to work and he designs it and he presents it to you and says, hey, here's this, that, and that. And when we did the podcast rodeo show, he gave me a couple designs to pick from. And then number three, you pick the one you want and you put it out into the wild. And it's been interesting. I've been doing kind of a book tour this week with, my book coming out, and I've had more people, because behind me is the logo for the School of Podcasting designed by Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And I have more people go, man, that is a cool logo. And I'm like, got to go talk to Mark at podcastbranding.co.
Well done.
So tell him Dave and Jim sent you. Again, podcastbranding.co. It's the way to go.
That's so slick. You should go into the jingle business.
Exactly. Let's see what's going on. Thanks to all the people already out in the comment area here. If you want to join in, I don't say this enough. AskThePodcastCoach.com/join.
I think you have a little ticker, don't you? That you could.
Actually, I could when I think about that. And if you want to, if you have a question, you can jump in live. I know Jason Bryant is here. Jason has some really cool stuff going on. If you want to jump in, I know Fred had mentioned what I thought of Adam Curry, and because this week, of course, was International Podcast Day. And unfortunately, I have this day job that kind of gets in the way at times. And I wanted to listen to International Podcast Day, especially with Adam Curry. And just, all the time I would pop over for 2 seconds. And then I was like, I wish I could. I really, really wish I cannot listen to podcasts and troubleshoot tickets at the same time. My brain cannot handle that much info. And
it's hard to do that kind of detailed work. If you're going to have things on in the background, you pretty much have to, for most of us, I think, be resolved. You can't do both at the same time. Like, you're going to either work or you're going to kind of listen, it is helpful to have some things on in the background. I think some people find that more focusing, to have something else happening and then focusing on the work. Now, your mileage might vary, but that's a tough thing to do, Dave. I don't reckon, if you get and listen, we're really single tasked human beings. people say multitasking. It's really not
You can't.
Yeah,
No.
it's really not true.
And the other thing I should mention is back in 2017, this little award came and sat on my desk and was like, "Daddy, will you go get me a brother or sister, please? I'm lonely." And International Podcast Day was a good day for me.
Really?
Number one, my book. This is so fun. It's so big fish and very small. I was the number one new release in the blogging category of Amazon, so that was fun. And then the School of Podcasting won for best technology in the People's Choice Awards, Podcast Awards, People's Choice. What is the official name of the Podcast Awards in the technology category?
Okay.
So thanks to Dave. Thanks to Dave. Yeah, thanks to me. Yeah, and to Todd and everybody over there, Mike, and well, all those guys. It's a lot of work, and I don't know if Todd got any death threats this year. That's always kind of fun, but that was a cool way because I was actually in the middle of a live group coaching thing at the School of Podcasting, and Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast shot me something in Slack, and I was like, "Hey, I think I just won a podcast award." So
nice. Congratulations.
yeah, so that was fun.
I'd love to see Ask the Podcast Coach win something. Maybe best live Saturday morning show at 10:30 Eastern. That takes callers. We'd be number one
There
in
you
that
go.
category, right? I think so.
Yeah, and especially if we said with host named Dave and Jim, I think we'd be a shoe-in.
Oh, for sure.
For
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one.
We're already number one. Let's proclaim it and put it on the bottom of your website. I'm sure that'll help us get listeners.
Yeah. So did you actually
Let's talk about YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You want to talk about YouTube?
Yeah,
So-
YouTube is go ahead.
So last week, YouTube kind of declared, and they've been talking about this for a while. Like this isn't new in the area of what they're trying to do to protect people, but they kind of announced they're going to start clamping down with some AI in areas of sites where their YouTube embeds, like you take your YouTube video and embed it on a third-party site, and if their AI determines that it needs age verification, so things like alcohol and tobacco and some of those other areas, right? Anything that's been deemed age appropriate, where they need to have some kind of age verification, they are going to redirect you back to YouTube to validate your Google ID, and you're going to have to make sure that you sign in there. That piece is rolling out here as we go. They've kind of, from an article on The Verge, they're kind of already talking and pre-positioning themselves that they're going to make mistakes. They were going, hey, this stuff is hard. We're going to make mistakes. Kind of get ready for that as this age verification thing rolls out. So it'll be interesting. It may already be in place and rolling out right now, but just know if you are using like for me, I have on the live page, I have my videos posted there, theaverageguy.tv/live. I post our videos there. That's where somebody tries to watch it after the fact and it's been deemed age appropriate and they want to validate the age, they're going to send you back for it and it's going to apply. So we'll have to see how it goes. Of course, they've been, YouTube has been working on this idea of these content providers who provide, you have to now specify in YouTube, I create content for children. I don't create content for children, because they've gotten busted a bunch. They've come down, especially here in the United States. They've come down or have been come down hard on videos that are not age appropriate, and kind of going after some people who are doing some not some great stuff, right? And so I'd rather err on the side of protection here. I'd rather try to protect the kids and have some mistakes than not protect them at all. And so I'm not saying it's good or anything, but I'm just saying if you have this going on, because some podcasters do, and you get some complaints from people that are listening, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And you can just like with the copyright strike, or just like with when they say, hey, you're playing some music or whatever, or trademark, or not trademark's not the right one, but copyright, I think is the right one. When they hit you and you can go in and dispute this. So you can go into the control panel and dispute the settings. So your mileage may vary. And I think, Dave, they're probably going to tweak this thing over the next year to figure out how to get it right. So they got some work to do. But I think it's important to know as podcasters, if you're pushing your stuff out to YouTube, those things could be happening.
Yeah, and keep in mind, YouTube and podcasting, while they were both content creation models, I think the fact that YouTube is a centralized location, like everybody ties into the same YouTube, whether it's the app or it's that one place. With podcasting, it's scattered. You get it in all the different apps, but we're all not using the same server, so it's a little harder to police that way and things of that nature. So as much as people are going, oh, if they're coming for YouTube, they're going to come to podcasting next. I'm like, I'm not sure that's the thing, but I'm with Jim. This is going to take a little while and there's going to be people complaining because this is so obviously not for kids, but it got flagged for kids because I said Barney in it, and I'm talking about my co-host, or who knows.
Well, I talk about cigars, and I've mentioned them here, and I talk about them from time to time in the or in Home Gadget Geeks, and that's obviously a tobacco product. And for a lot of sites, we kind of do the opposite. We do a beer pour on Home Gadget Geeks. Now I do it in the pre-show, and that's not a part of the show that I moved to YouTube, but I am streaming it on YouTube when we're doing it. And so, hey, that's if you go in the United States, if you go to an alcohol site, they're gonna do an age verification for you right up front before you jump in. Yep, in almost all cases, you're gonna have to verify your age. Now that's you're self-reporting, like they're not checking your ID, right? But those kinds of things are happening. So hasn't happened to me yet, Dave, but I definitely because we talk about tobacco and because we talk about alcohol on our show. Yeah, there's a chance to get flagged on that. Hey, the other thing YouTube is doing, I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're giving you the opportunity to publish and this has been there, but now it's kind of flagging you for it. They're giving you the opportunity to say, hey, maybe I should publish this thing as unlisted first. Let it run through the Google juice, right, to figure out if that's going to happen before I publish it to my subscribers. Because so many people publish live right away, and then it gets flagged, and they've put it in stuff, and it's they've put it in their websites and all those kinds of things. And so they're actually recommending it through the process flow. Hey, do you want to publish this unlisted? Let us look at it first, and then we'll tell you. We'll send you a note when it's done. So that's been a change, I think, in the last maybe month or two, where they're with part of the new interface. They're kind of recommending.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah, well, so I did that 3 weeks ago. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So I let it run. Then I totally forgot. And like Monday came around, and I'm like, oh, I never published this thing. So it was unlisted the whole time, right? So that's not great either, because you want to. Yeah,
it's more work.
It's a follow-up step that you got to make sure you get into. So. So there's some changes going on at YouTube. I don't know how many. I'd love to hear in the chat room how many of you are using YouTube as well to publish your content. So in a podcast, making it audio, are you also publishing some form of it to YouTube? Chat room, let us know, yes or no. Just like to get an idea how many out there this affects.
Yeah, and Bangs is saying, I really don't need so much protection. Yeah, see that.
Yeah, they're not protecting Bangs though. That's the thing. They're protecting people. Listen, there's plenty of really bad stuff on YouTube, and I would rather err on the side. This is not his opinion, by the way. It's mine. Yeah. I would rather err on the side of protecting people than not on that. And so, that's a debate you can get into. Your preferences may vary. You can run your YouTube channel however you like, or go somewhere else. Right? You can if you don't like what YouTube is doing. You can go, oh, there isn't any other place to go. That is kind of a problem, Dave, because I was trying to add a post the other day that had gotten flagged. I've mentioned this story here before. I had the NFL playing in the background. My guest did. Got flagged, taken down. It's not in my post. So I thought, well, I'll just go to Vimeo, right? I'll go post that video on Vimeo. Well, okay, Vimeo's a little different than it used to be, right? They have restrictions, and they're really trying to push you into their paid plan. So you could go and play. I guess there's some other places you could go to. There's a cryptocurrency based video service out there that you could go to. But I mean, YouTube really does have a monopoly in this space. So it has some concerns. The good news is we do have a few choices in this, and you don't have to use them.
Yeah, the chat room saying that some people are and some people are not. We'll probably be hearing from Mr. Naughty Bits in the future because he's saying right now we have the wrong end of this dog, and he used a really big word that I've never heard of, apologia, which sounds like some sort of Disney character or country. We went over to the land through the river upon the crest of Apologia. We saw Sir so and so.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
I did want to. This is a question that was asked a while ago, and that is trying to remember: does Dave like or not like Divi? This is one of those opinion things. I know Jason Bryant, who's in the chat room, who can come in anytime now. He said he was going to come in. And for me, the good news about Divi, you can do anything. I mean, anything. It will do your laundry. The bad news about Divi is there are times when I don't need that much options. I want this to be a black background, this blah, blah. And it just seems like they go into now developers love that. Mark, I know, is a big Divi fan. For me, I like Elementor a little more than for me, a great combination for a WordPress site is Elementor and second line themes. That's what I've been using. But on the other hand, Divi, 6 one way, half a dozen the other. I did realize that I made one page with Divi using the Divi plugin, not the Divi theme, and then accidentally turned off the Divi plugin, and that page just turned into a bunch of gobbledygook. So that's kind of the same thing with almost all these page builders. You're kind of marrying them so that if you decide to later switch, in fact, I've seen where there are tools that will convert Divi to like back to WordPress because it's on its own kind of ecosystem. So I'm not against it. Just for me, when I used it, it seemed to kind of slow down my website a little bit. And again, that could have easily been operator error. Maybe I was doing something wrong. But for me, I'm kind of it's okay. Just not my favorite. So what else is going on in the
Dave, what do you think? Let me ask you about this. I subscribed to this audio burst service. Have you heard of that before? Yeah.
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it yet.
So I basically gave them the ability to count whenever I post something new, that RSS feed automatically pulls it into audio burst. And it's a lot like Clamor in the sense that I think its goal is to create little snippets of your show, and they're trying to find them automatically. Where Clamor, you had to put them in yourself, right? You had to go out and find them and get 30 seconds of your show. In this, they're actually trying to do some things. They're also a transcription service, which I've looked at their transcriptions and they're average. They're okay. They have a free plan that gets you some stuff, and the rest of it's paid. But they are making kind of a run at this idea, and you can see it right there, where they're trying to grab little important snippets of your show and serve them up to you in some form. You can go in and edit them and do some of those kinds of things. Clamor tried this in largely unsuccessful. The idea, I think we all think the idea of little audio. We in the business, Gallup, we call those pull quotes, right? When you publish an article and you put the little quotes up there, these idea of audio pull quotes we're pulling out. It seems like that should work. It just doesn't seem to get any traction though when we actually try to do it.
See, I have heard Charlie over at the Business of Podcasting has had a couple serious SEO guys on. Charlie himself is really into marketing and loves to test things. And we all were like, hey, this headliner thing is like the best. And I know Libsyn just had a webinar on headliner, and nobody's really seeing huge results, if any, at this point.
It seems like it should make sense. Like, hey, short little snippets. Everybody's saying how people's attention spans are getting small, and there is some indication that if I make a video snippet and I add transcriptions to it and I put it on Facebook, there does seem to be some indication that gets some traction, because people are doing other things, going to the bathroom and watching they're watching these things. They don't want the volume on, and so they're watching it with the words going. But I don't know. I don't know what's going for. It looks like we got Jason in here. Let's bring him in.
We do have Mr. One and Only. Mr. When you hear the word wrestling, you think Jason Bryant, and that really is the case. When I hear horses, I think of Glenn. When I see anything about video games, I think of Danny Pena. There are certain words and things that immediately make me think of certain people. And when I hear, especially college wrestling, I'm like, you know what? I bet Jason has his toe in this somehow. So, Jason Bryant, how are you, buddy?
I'm just enjoying my morning coffee pour from a podcaster mug. Everyone, we remember Silent Bob from NMX. Well, this was his show, and as a patron, I definitely use this. This is one thing I love: coffee mugs for patron, yes, or things like that. So, yes, Dave. And when I think of white spandex photos, I think of Dave Jackson and Podfest. So, yeah. By the way, Jim, I also made sure I put my humidor out behind me, so
Thank you.
You can see that right up on the bar. That is
don't do the T word. Don't mention the T word.
They may or may not be legal in the United States. I will leave that up to you. If that particular brand that may come from a place that sounds like Savannah.
I know where you've been. I know I've been following you. I know where you've been, which is pretty great. Maybe I should get an invite to come over and enjoy one with you.
Well, I think this place is now, it's fine. Years I've been talking about building this thing. It's the first time it's made its appearance here on the Ask the Podcast Coach, because normally when I listen, I'm upstairs with my laptop or my tablet or my phone, and I've already been to soccer practice this morning for my 4-year-old. So the day has started early here on Saturday.
Dave, his blue is a lot like your blue. That you're right, little dark blue.
A little bit, yeah.
Mine's called Honorable Blue, in case you're wondering, from Sherwin-Williams.
Mine is called Deep Breath. So,
wow.
Meaning, if you hold it, that's what color you turn.
I think that's it.
I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it is.
I want to know how entertaining is 4-year-old soccer games. That's got to be amazing.
Well, it's not a game, so it's just practice. So I missed out last week because I was actually at an event in Iowa. I was actually working a wrestling event, socially distanced, of course. And so I missed out on the first one. And apparently there was basketball going on with it. So today was just a couple kids. So the kids that we see at the park at my youngest daughter's Montessori school that, we play at the park after school. Parents are all socially distanced. The kids, whatever. But we're in there watching. We're all wearing our masks alongside, and it was this former college soccer player at a Division III school here in Minnesota, just teaching the kids. And I'm pretty pleased with my daughter's, balance right now, because she can do the tip and the tip and the tip, and her attention span's pretty good. So it's not like 6-year-old T-ball, where when you're at a T-ball game for your 6-year-old, there's a sandcastle on second base. And I mean, he's not building a sandcastle. He's putting it on second base. So those with young kids, my girls, I don't know if they're going to get into the swinging bat sports yet. I'm not pushing them in that direction. Both my girls asked to play. Ruby asked to play soccer, and Lucy, my oldest, asked to join karate. So we'll see how those go.
There we go. So... But meanwhile, in the world of wrestling, we were kind of talking the other day that you've done something that not only promotes the shows on your network, but also just the general wrestling population.
Right. So years ago, as we all know, that Dave and Steve Lee created an amazing thing called, at first, National Podcast Day, which morphed into International Podcast Day. And as if anybody knows that when this show is on, I'm always definitely, hey, good morning, all. I mean, I've watched this show from, I think, 10 different countries at this point, and I've made it abundantly clear whenever I'm watching from a different location, I let everybody know. That's a little bit of the podcaster ego involved. And, hey, look at me, I'm over here. So, and, it's when you listen to other people's shows, oh, I got mentioned, cool, and then you retweet it and stuff like that. But in this case, I looked at Dave and Steve with International Podcast Day this year, and I've always made a point to consume the content because I love what it does for the community, especially independent podcasters. Because while there is, I did get a notification from Spotify on my phone saying, "Hey, celebrate International Podcast Day." I'm like, considering some of your bigger shows aren't technically podcasts, I found that rather interesting, but we won't go there right now. So I looked at what I could do. I'm like, okay. Because I've noticed this disconnect between my sport and we've had 120, 121 shows come and go. Of course, we know that, I'm counting them all. So I'm like, well, what can I do to bring my people, the people that ask me the questions, into this world of Dave and Jim and knowing it, Blueberry, Libsyn, Spreaker, to basically kind of close that gap between, me feeling a lot of these questions or seeing my friends start shows and without even asking me. And I'm just like, no, why did you do that? So part of it is outreach in terms of let's close the gap. Let's bring people from my wrestling world into an environment where they now are they have access to people like you guys to basically say, hey, podcast space, meet the wrestling space. Let's do some good together. So that was part of it. And it wasn't all about my network, too. This was about just kind of an outreach, because if I could have done my network, I could have just had Matt Talk Podcast Network shows for the same amount of time, and I don't think anybody would have been completely disappointed. But what I did was I kind of took Dave and Steve's format that they kind of used a couple years ago, doing the long, and I said, okay, I'm going to start at 9 a.m., and I'm going to end when I end. And my initial map was like, okay, I can do this for 9 or 10 hours. Yes, 9 or 10 hours I was going to subject myself to an online stream, talking about wrestling, talking about the shows. And then I started building the Google Doc in the an hour increments. I was going to do an hour. And then all of a sudden I got a demand. I put it out on Twitter. Anybody interested, let me know. And then I sent the link to people signing up, and they were doing 1 hour blocks. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to promote as many people as I want on this. So I broke them into 30-minute blocks. I think I ended up having 26 different podcasters over the course of 15 hours. I took the 9:30 session was actually wide open, so I started for 30 minutes, was off for 30, and then I didn't stop until 6 p.m., had an hour dinner break, downloaded my files, and then come back and start at 7, and then we didn't stop until 1 a.m. because once we were done, we did what we call it recovery time. In wrestling, there is injury time where you get hurt, you got a minute and a half to get better, or else you lose. Well, recovery time is when you get slammed on your head in an illegal move and you have 2 minutes to recover. So I'm like, okay, recovery time is going to be our happy hour, because happy hour is kind of overused in some respects,
Sure.
especially with Zoom. So we had a photographer buddy of mine in California, so it wasn't late for him. It was like 8:30 when he joined in. But ultimately, I had 26 guests representing 24 shows over 15 hours, and they weren't all just Matt Talk shows. So basically it was open for anybody. If there's people that have had 300 shows, there are people that have had 4 shows, and I was very agnostic in terms of who gets in, who gets out. It's basically first come, first serve if you've got something to talk about. Some of them we doubled up on. We had two guests, and one time we had only 2 real issues. We used StreamYard the entire time.
That was going to be my question.
Well, here's the thing. I was worried about it because, I had played with StreamYard. I've used StreamYard for about 2 months now with some of my other shows. And I'm like, okay, this is a monumental task. First of all, my wife gets the credit for, I told her about it 2 weeks before we started. I was like, I'm going to do this. She's like, okay. And then 3 days before, I'm like, I've got this thing on Wednesday, right? Because my oldest daughter has a hybrid model. So she goes to school Mondays and Wednesdays and then every other Friday. Well, thankfully, International Podcast Day fell on a Wednesday. So my oldest was out of the house for most of the day, so I could do that. But my wife was on Johnny on the spot when I had 5-minute sections. She said, "Hey, why don't you take the last 5 minutes and put take a break?" And I read that as put a slate up to be right back. So I did that. Yeah. She brought me lunch and coffee and things of that nature. So it was a grind. I tell you what, by 3:00, I sent my wife a text. I said, "Can you bring me the eye drops?" Because it's one thing, as an announcer, I talk a lot anyway. So to be forced to talk as a PA announcer for 8 hours a day, it puts a strain because you're being forced to talk with a certain way. Now, when you're being forced to look at your computer screen and actively engaged, that first 9 hours was just, and I'm just like, oh, my face, my face, my eyes. And then we come back around and, it was a grind. I tell you what, though. And I did it live, so just in case, using StreamYard, I sent it out to YouTube Live, I sent it out to Twitch, and I also sent it out to Periscope because I was going to use Facebook Live because that's where I think my audience is. Right. But StreamYard and Facebook aren't playing super nice right now. And also, when you build a page through Divi, I had the embeds up there, and the Facebook embeds, the Facebook max was, I think, 4 hours or 8 hours, one of the two. And I had 4 different sessions. I'm like, this is just going to be, and I was going to have to email the guests, here's your specific link, here's your specific link. And then I got on support with StreamYard, and they're like, yeah, I'd suggest YouTube for something like this. So I had only 2 embeds to worry about, put them both up in advance. During that break, switched them out, one's still in the bottom. And then I tell you, the response I got through Periscope via Twitter was actually I've got 14,000 followers there in my personal account. I was really surprised on how the chat integration worked, and I was, we were throwing them up on the screen using this format, and it was something that I felt the wrestling community was, the numbers weren't huge. I didn't get hundreds of viewers. I got total hundreds of viewers, but anywhere live, it was anywhere between 30 and 7, depending on how long it goes. And I noticed that the longer you're on Periscope, the less you get as far as their views. So if you're new, quick, hot, if you're using Periscope for through StreamYard or through Restream, short bursts are probably what get you the better views, because for some reason they just kind of my chat interactions were much more limited when as the show went on, because when I fired back up at 7:00, more Periscope comments and stuff. So tell you what, it was a labor of love for sure.
Well, that was going to be my question. So you put in all this work, benefits, something you're going to do next year, or?
Well, depending on what you mean by the term benefits.
Well,
did it pay off? I mean, is there enough social payoff? I think it did,
because this wasn't about me highlighting my network. The whole point was to be honest, yes, I'm the guy that's facilitating it. Yes, Matt Talk Online is my brand. Yes, I've basically I didn't invent podcasting. We all know that. But I kind of brought a lot of wrestling podcast into the sport. So, when I started in 2008, there was one that I knew of, and that was not even that was a combat sports show that sometimes mentioned wrestling. And later on, I found out there's been a show in Western Iowa since 2006. So I found that out like in 2015. Go figure. But I found the benefit is this was it was really more of an altruistic type of thing, because it wasn't about me. I did throw my Patreon up there, I think once or twice, but I didn't want to take away from my guests, because the point was to talk about what podcasting has done for their voice. Why did they do it? Why podcasting is taken two people, the two people drinking beer talking about wrestling, and two of them are legit media outlets now. They get press credentials at the NCAA championships. So, and then it's a super niche, because we got somebody that's talking about the schools in the ACC, somebody that's talking about schools in just the Quad Cities. There's people that are talking about schools just in Iowa. There's talking about, the wrestling fans in Michigan. We had the whole, spectrum of it. And then I made sure to try to get as many different media outlets. I mean, Flow Wrestling and Flow Sports, they have a very popular 3 times daily morning show called Flow Wrestling Radio Live. I had one of their co-hosts on, Ben Askren. He was an Olympian. He's been in Bellator and in the UFC. So to bring him in, and then one of their other employees down. And then I got Track Wrestling, which is kind of one of their rivals. They were in the morning, a couple newspapers that have shows. So to be able to promote what these shows are doing, and how and from a journalism angle, how like a newspaper used to be one and done, file your story, you're done, how social media has evolved, and now how they're using the podcast to go maybe long form, where they may have 10, 12 inches in a newspaper to get a quick little story in. They can go 45 minutes and talk about, say, the wrestler that's on the fringe of the coverage area that doesn't get the exposure, and you can do a whole show with them. So it was really, in my opinion, I use the term passion project a lot that day, but it was really one of those situations that I'm going to do it again next year, but I'm not going to do it the same way. I'm probably going to, where Steve and Dave figured it out, I'm going to figure it out too. So I think I'm going to have co-hosts next year, host swaths of segments, and I kind of hang back and moderate and not necessarily be just as involved, be like, but yes, Kyle, co-host are 5 in this case.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because somebody asked about it earlier, and Daniel, if you have a link, Daniel has an episode on different page builders. You're using Divi. What are your thoughts on Divi?
I love Divi for a couple reasons, but I don't like Divi for a couple reasons. Now, the set it and forget it, if you have static pages, I love Divi for that, because my homepage for years, when I was building on just a basic WordPress, and of course it's WordPress, I'd have a category that was like main slider. And it would show up in, if the theme that I was using was more of a magazine type of theme, where you'd have 4 or 5 posts, and then you'd have to go and take them down. And then it was kind of disjointed on how you'd be able to press play on the homepage. And then what Divi did is it gave me an option where I can do the homepage slider, the most 10 recent, because I can select, most recent from those categories. But then, because I have a network page, and I have at one now, I have 18 active shows and then 19 retired shows. So you've got a slide. I actually could pull up the share screen, I can do that. Or you can bring it up, either one, Dave. MadTalkOnline.com. But what it is you've got the show art and the most recent show, and then you've got the social links that I build, and then I use the Blueberry playlist. So if you go to my page, you can press play and listen to 18 different podcasts, but you can also listen to anywhere from 5 or 10 of their most recent shows by simply clicking it. So that's one thing that I don't have to touch that page at all unless I want to add, say, the linked International Podcast Day or things of that nature. Now, what I'm struggling with is the individual pages, because I use Libsyn for my primary hosting on a bunch of my shows, and then I have Spreaker for some other shows. But I use the Blueberry PowerPress plugin to create a network feed. That means if you like all of these shows, so there's the homepage, as Dave's got. So if you scroll down, I've got there, of course, there's the flagship shows get up there first. So they get the full width. Rudis is on hiatus right now, but when you scroll down to beyond when you get to the double up, so there you see you've got some client shows, you've got the artwork, sometimes the graphics don't exactly line up, but you've got the most recent 5 there, the most recent 5 there. You keep scrolling down, there's the most recent 10 there. So you can play all these, click them, and they'll all hit in the player. And that's through and Divi allowed me to do that. So, with their short codes. Now, on the internal pages...
Jason, does Divi give you the jukebox features down below then as well, the players? Or how?
I'm not, the one that runs across the bottom?
Yeah, the 5 episodes on the bottom.
So, yeah, I think that's a PowerPress.
This
thing.
is all a PowerPress
okay.
playlist short code. Yeah. So you can go into Blueberry and be like, okay, I want category, limit number. Do you want to show artwork? And that took a little jiggering, but this is what Divi allows me to do, is I don't have to touch this page ever. Unless I want to change, I can use the Divi builder on the front end. If you scroll back up to the top, Dave, I can explain that is, I've got the Podcast Academy a little bit further up. So that sidebars, I move these sidebars around and the graphics around there. I've got to, again, organize them, because I just corrected that on the fly. But if you scroll through the next slider, go back up to the main slider section, recent episodes and posts, and, tab over past that press release, I'll give you an example of the show page that is kind of.
Where am I headed?
So, or you can either click the Make a Difference link. You can click, or because that
Make a Difference.
Scroll down a little bit to the short time, and then click the big text where it says More. So in there, that is the show page. So what I struggle here is I've done this. This is a Divi template that when you build a page, build it in Divi. Initially, I had players other places. And so now you see I've got the player here. Part of that is I'm still trying to figure out why Divi, or where Divi reads the text field. Because initially I had the player up a little higher, and then when I pulled it into PowerPress, the show notes were pulling podcast, play a new window, download, embed, subscribe. All that stuff was in the show notes before the text. And I'm like, well, let's move that down so I can pull off, say, I want the show notes to say Mike Dixon has a long career, blah, blah, blah. Well, now Divi's not reading that. They're reading the title. And I'm trying to get with tech support, be like, hey, which field, when you build a text template, will this plugin read? And they're like, it's third party. We don't know. I'm like, no, you have a whole tutorial on your page about Blueberry PowerPress. Don't give me this third party schlock. So I'm a little bit annoyed by the fact that if there is any type of plugin that is not theirs, they claim ignorance right away. And so... whereas, and then I showed them, and then I escalated. I'm like, look, you know what? You told me not to use this plugin. And that is your response. That was not the tech support answer I wanted. So 90% in love with Divi. The 10% I wish is they would be a little bit more. I mean, they pimp PowerPress on their website in their knowledge base to say this, if you're starting a podcast, here's a step-by-step how to set up PowerPress with Divi, yet I gave them screenshots. I gave them links. Like, look, this is when I did it this way, and this is when I did it this way. And they're like, So I'm going to reach out to Mike Dell over at Blueberry to be like, okay, hey, you guys obviously know a little bit about the Divi because, their theme changes sometimes break your code and vice versa. So you're aware of it. That's the only drawback I have is if but my master feed show notes are wonky donkey. So as my daughter would say.
Nice.
But otherwise, from a staging perspective, I mean, it's not just like I don't auto post anything anymore. Like Libsyn can flow it there because I like to build the show notes
Right.
Just that way. And then as far as your YouTube question earlier, I put it there, but I don't promote it. So.
Jason, you're using Daniel's plugin as well, social subscribe and follow.
For the short time show, because again, with the network show, I actually haven't spent the time to ask Daniel any questions like, can that work with a network? I know he's been working on that thing for a while.
Yeah. So, listen, if you have some questions, I make it kind of work with my network. So I got some keys in there. It doesn't not native for everything, but there's some ways to get it done. So you and I can have a conversation if you need to.
What I did was one of the issues I had with the network page and why I went to changing to Divi templates versus just using the stock page, and then that populates just fine. Well, on the sidebar of the stock page was only the short time subscribe links. Whereas, so if you're listening to the Virginia Tech show and the subscribe links are on the side, that link doesn't subscribe to your Virginia Tech; it subscribes you to another show. So. That's why I changed up the format to like use the Divi builder, use this loaded template and stuff like that. So I love Daniel's plugin. I've had it for probably 5 years or as long as he's ever had it. In regards to that, so
worth every cent. By the way, worth every cent.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's really, really good and extendable. Like I've got it, on my site. I have it both on the front page and then I have a subscribe page. I could really customize those links to go just about anywhere, and it just shows some great graphics. He just updated it too with a bunch of the new ones as well, including Discord, which hadn't been out there for a while but is now. So if you haven't checked it out, social subscribe. Am I getting that right? Social subscribe and follow, right?
Or you can go to schoolofpodcasting.com/subscribe and follow.
There's we go.
Pitch.
Nice job. Nice job. Do that as well. Jason, thanks for the update. By the way, we're doing on Home Gadget Geeks, we're doing an all-day barbecue grill and smoker kind of virtual meetup. So it's not all day. I won't be podcasting all day, but it's 8 to 8. So it's going to be a 12-hour deal. So I was listening intently as you were talking about. Now I have some breaks. We have some built-in breaks. We're going to live stream smokers and some other stuff. So it's not all day, but
are you going to put one in at the start and then eat it at the end?
Yeah. That's well.
Did I just steal your thunder there?
No, not at all. That's the whole point is we have an open at 8 p.m. Central, or I'm sorry, 8 a.m. Central. We'll do dry rubs and what we're doing to put together. I've got a bunch of folks doing this. Then we'll put them on at noon. We'll check them. So there's a live check. You might want to join us for this. There's a cigar smoke at 3:00 if you want to just jump in and enjoy a cigar with some fellows.
When are we coming up on that again? What's the date?
It is coming up October 24th. Head out to theaverageguy.tv and the most recent episode's got some details on it.
What do you know? I believe I'm available because
you might want to join us for that.
Not like, there's one. I got a wrestling event coming up this coming week in Iowa. I've had 3 since March, so
you don't have to be there all day.
It's not like I'm doing anything.
But
I'm just picturing Jim like coming over to the grill or the smoker or whatever. It's like it's time to eat the brisket or whatever it is, and it's just like
I'm seeing him.
Here it is.
Channel his inner Bob Ross meets like Grill Guys meets Guy Fieri meets. It's all just pretty black bark.
Dude, it's gonna be delicious. I'm hoping I get 4 or 5 of these going all at the same time. So we get it started, and then there'll be a smoker cam going all day where everybody, I'll be featuring different smokers going on then right after lunch, we'll meet to do a progress check, and then we'll smoke cigars at 3. And then in the evening, we'll have pictures and talk about it, maybe even some live taste testing of what guys have grilled. So October 24th, if you want to join it, theaverageguy.tv. The most recent episode, I think 462, is published, and there's some details in there.
I get your Spreaker notifications, so I know when you go live. So if the kids are, if we're done with dinner and the kids are, I can come down and pop it up.
But it's gonna be a long day. It's gonna be a long
day. One thing I did want to
to
add about StreamYard real quick for those who are curious about it. This is where I found a limitation. If you're going to do an all day thing, I've streamed to Twitch, and I'm really glad I did because that saves if you got to make sure you save it. You click the setting and you save it. My audience isn't there, so I'm not really worried about if they're going to find it, because I'm going to repurpose this stuff and put it up as separate shows because it's good stuff to repurpose, because not everybody's going to go back and see it live. I unlisted the YouTube right now, so if you watched it and you're on the page, you can go find it, because I want to go back and repurpose that for some monetization purposes. But StreamYard, I'm at the middle, I'm at the paid level, but I'm not at pro, I'm at basic, and they cut you at 4 hours. So if you're trying to build out right embeds and right shows, I went back to pull it down off of StreamYard, and I stopped at 4 hours. And the professional is only at 8 hours. So my first session was 9 hours. I would have missed that. So you can pull it off of YouTube Live, or you can pull it off of Twitch. So one thing that I love StreamYard, I think their audio quality when you pull it down on a show is good enough. I can do some, it's not, dual channel, it's not multi-track, but it is good enough for me to have used it on my shows in the last 2 months. But again, if you're looking to archive it, be aware of what you're paying for. I didn't read their what I get too great when I bought it, and I tried to reach out to see if there was anything, but that's what I had. So those are the two things I got.
Jason, unfortunately, we're up against a commercial break, so thanks for jumping in here. How do you like that transition, Jason? Great to hear from you. Hope to see you on the 24th. Come out and join us.
Yeah, I'm gonna enjoy your coffee pour, and we'll talk about how awesome people are.
All right, appreciate it, Jason. Thanks for jumping in. We do it, man. We went 45 minutes, Dave. I am dying. Let's do it quick. What do we got?
Yeah, we're going to thank our awesome supporters, and we're talking about, and we have some news about our awesome supporters, which is kind of cool. First of all, if you want to be the teacher's pet, still have one-on-one consulting at a discounted rate. This is all at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. But we always thank our $20 supporters. Jim, you played last week with indiedropin.com.
I did. I heard back from him too.
And anything to report at this point?
No, because I have a tech show and they're not ready for tech shows yet. But they emailed me almost immediately and said, "Hey, we're still working on that. There's some shows out there." So I submitted it. Within an hour, I had some information back. So they're definitely paying attention over there. I'm excited when they do start accepting tech shows.
Nice. And Kim Craggy over at Toastmasters101.net. If you are a person that is kind of worried about talking in public or just putting yourself out as a podcast, Toastmasters is a great way to kind of get your foot in the door, your toe in the water, whatever it is. Check it out, Toastmasters101.net. Shane at Spyberry, check this out. Now, Shane always promotes Spyberry here. He also has Tourpreneur. He has a show about East Germany, and it was on the front page of, let me pull up my notes here real quick. I'll put this in the chat room. He was on the front page of like ChinaDaily.com. And they mentioned, which is like the top like podcast or not pod, it's like the top news source or something like that in China. And he got mentioned. His show is something Radio G. It's in the article. Radio GPR, GDR, G something with Germany. But I want to say GDR. That could be wrong. But congratulations to Shane. That's his third podcast now. And I will get the link here when I get done thanking the other awesome supporters like Michael Delaney at Baby Mountain Radio. Check him out, babymountainradio.com. Ed Sullivan, which you'll be seeing very soon, Jim.
Yeah, it's about 10 days.
Yeah, soniccupcake.com. Do we have a name for the tour? Did you?
I think it was, well, I'm going to be on a Cigar Authority, so maybe we'll just call it I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't, because now we just got flagged on YouTube.
Carl White at lifeinthecarolinaspodcast.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. Greg, if you're looking for some financial help, he teaches financial wellness over at debtshepherd.com. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And, again, $20 will get your name read. There are other benefits. If you do like 10, you get your name on the website and things like that. And on occasion, we will thank everyone. But wow, this day is going super quick, and there are tons of questions. There was somebody just kept spewing them here. Where did the one? Podcasting is mostly considered audio-based content. There are podcasts based on video as well. Is there any kind of prejudice or I guess criticism in the podcast community of video-based podcasts? The only thing, you'll have people that will, like, if you're just a YouTube channel and you call yourself a podcast, there will be people who are like, it's not really a podcast because there's no RSS feed. Okay. So, Joe Rogan technically is no longer a podcast. It's the Joe Rogan show.
He's no longer a podcast all the way to the bank.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Listen, he reached the pinnacle. For most podcasters, they would love to get $100 million a year, whatever they're paying him. I forget what the number is. They'd love that. Everybody would love that. So let's get away from whether it's a podcast or not. He's crushing it. And for now, listen, this is going to come and go. Like these kinds of deals come and go. This is not going to last forever. So we'll expect that to tail off, and Joe will reinvent himself somewhere else.
Yeah.
But man, to get that kind of payoff, good for you, Joe.
And then I've got another quick question. I see Jim's got something coming up here. Have you ever received a guest really interested in discussing the podcast theme instead of considering it a platform for self-promotion? Is it always about business? Have you ever had a guest really interested in discussing?
Oh, in other words, like they're not coming on just to promote themselves. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's up to you. I mean, it's your job. Again, you're the goalie. And if you got somebody that's just like, well, in my book, I say this, and in my book, I say that, you're like, all right, either A, cut it out in editing, or just stop the interview and go, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you a chance to promote your book. You don't need to keep promoting the book in every answer. Or if they're just, I said in my book in chapter 5. Yeah.
That's not always bad, when they're doing that. You can always kind of turn those things maybe with a little bit of editing. But yeah, I have vendors on all the time on Home Gadget Geeks that they'll talk about their stuff, but we get more than just the business end of it in the conversation. So part of it is in the way you interview too. Like, you got to be ready for that interview, and you got to be able to ask them questions that don't just tee up. I mean, if you're starting like, hey, you said in your book that, right? I mean, if you're having somebody on, you obviously read the book, hopefully, or maybe not. Maybe that's a way to do it where you don't mention the book every other time. But yeah, I think you can.
Yeah. And Jim, what do you have here? We're sharing your screen.
This is a great example of that, where we had one of the engineers from Unraid on Home Gadget Geeks. And then they promoted it on their website. Their social guy is on top of things. And so for the longest time, we were in the first spot, right? When it first came in, but we've moved our way down, but a really nice, you can kind of see me in the upper, right up in here, a little bit of me, but one of our listeners, Mike Uyghur, my co-host. But that's the kind of thing that can happen when you partner with some of these things, and you get a really good company to do this. They'll promote it on their own website. And, you'd mentioned that one before during our, the supporter segment. This has happened. This just recently happened to us. So you can, those kinds of things can be beneficial when you got some good partners.
Yeah. Mystic asks, have I seen the new Zoom Podtrak 8? Yeah, we talked a little bit about it last week. I actually have one on the way from Zoom for me to play with, so that'll be cool. It looks a lot like, you have the P4, which is a great portable recorder, as well as an interface, and you can tie in the phone and things like that. The P8 looks, number one, who's going to have 6 people in the same room with you? But I guess if you wanted to have 4 people plus a USB interface plus a phone, we're in the realm of Rodecaster Pro territory there, and it's $100 cheaper. So it doesn't have all the built-in effects and things that the Rode does. It has some. You have like a bass and treble, and I think they have a de-esser and things like that. But yeah, it looks promising. I'm just excited because these keep coming out, and they're just going to get better and cheaper. And
it's a good time for it. It's good. There's a lot of good innovation going on around it. So now's the time to pay attention, I think, in that area. Or if you're thinking about upgrading, oops, I spilled my coffee. Oh, it hit the mixer. It's time to upgrade.
Yeah, Jason had another point here about doing long shows, Jim. Be aware of your earbuds.
Yeah, well, and
headphones.
I specifically bought earbuds. I use Earbuds, YURBUDS. They were kind of designed and developed by triathletes for working out for long periods of time. They're waterproof. They do some, they've got some other benefits to them. And they have a soft earpiece that's kind of molded to the ear. It's not custom molded, but they have a couple different sizes. And I've done a CES podcast for 8 or 9 hours with these things in, and have not had problems with my ears hurting. They're getting harder and harder to find, but that's my brand of choice for going a long time. I don't, again, designed by folks who have them in 4 or 5 hours at a time. Those triathletes do these crazy brick workouts, where they're swimming and running and biking for hours at a time. So, that's for me, that was a necessity in the very beginning, and those have been great earbuds for that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bangs is saying, hey, the China Daily is run by the Chinese, the CCP.
Nice.
It's a direct mouthpiece of the CCP and not a reliable source. I wasn't really giving a thumbs up on the source. I was giving a thumbs up on, hey, here's something that gets a lot of exposure in China, and Shane is on the front page.
Yeah, interesting.
So, that was just more kudos of, hey, it's like being mentioned in pod, like Jason got mentioned in Pod News for his event, and that's something that has a lot of, ears and eyeballs and things like that. I start off my morning with James has a thing for Amazon.
James Cridlin.
Yeah. So I have a thing where I ask Alexa what's new, and that's part of my news. I basically listen to that. And then I also have his newsletter. So a lot of times that way, if he mentions something that I just listened to and I want to dig in deeper, you can go in. And yeah, Bing says the P8, the Zoom P8 has an auto mix built in. So yeah, all that stuff it's just like the Rodecaster where you get separate tracks and then you have a stereo track. And then, it basically, like I said, the only thing is the Rodecaster has a little more control over that. So, and then I'm with Daniel. What's the Rodecaster Pro 2 going to be? And are they going to come out with a smaller version that's cheaper?
Have you heard? Are they?
I haven't heard a thing.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the interesting, because at this point we're all like, oh, look what Zoom did. And it's one of those where you never know. And,
they'll leapfrog each other for a while, right? And as they learn on these listen, V1 had its problems, and it always does. Like I'm kind of a wait till V2 kind of guy until they work out a lot of those problems. Or in Microsoft's case, you always wait for the third version to come out before you buy. You never buy V1 or V2 if it's a Microsoft product. You always kind of wait till V3.
Yeah. So, but wow, it is time went in warp speed today.
You must be having fun. That's it. The key, right? When it goes fast, you're having fun.
Yeah. But Jim, what is coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah. So Mike Uyghur, my co-host, gives us kind of part 2. If you're a ham radio guy, there's a lot of cool technology now in ham. He talks about some antennas, and he's actually interfacing his ham radio to the computer, which this is not your father's ham radio segment. And so super cool. We also talked about a little Microsoft To Do and a little Windows Sandbox. So, and I talk about the meetup. So go to theaverageguy.tv, look for 462, and you'll get all those details, including a Dave Jackson inspired table of contents that, Dave, you've inspired me to get that every single week, so you know exactly where to go.
I've been trying today to add markers as we go along to make my table of contents easier. And I would like to say I have failed miserably.
Yeah.
Because I am too busy listening to go, oh, we switched topics.
That's what I use the transcripts for, by the way. That's an easy way to visually get the, yeah.
I did that this week with a 90-minute School of Podcasting group coaching thing. And the members ate it up. Like, here's what we talked about in timestamps. And they're like, that was the coolest thing ever, which was done automatically in Otter. I just uploaded the audio and then took the timestamps and posted the video. And they're like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. On the School of Podcasting, I'm going to do something. All this content I created, but I did it on other people's shows. I've done a ton of book interviews. And so I'm going to take maybe a question from each interview and put it into one episode, so that I'm doing two things. A, I'm telling you about my book, and B, I'm promoting the other people that help promote me. So that's what's in my head as of right now at 10:30 or 11:30 on October 3rd. So we'll see what happens between now and Monday. But thanks to the chat room. Stick around for some post show. And we're back. So
you made it through the whole show, didn't promote your book once. So, I mean, it did at the very end, right. but a big week for your book.
Have you ever been on an interview and realized, unbeknownst to you, that you were influencing people? And this sounds weird because I'm trying to do this without it sound like a weird humble brag. But there were times when I was being interviewed on these shows, and they're like, today it's, a legend in podcasting. And I'm like, are you guys talking about me? It was really just at times, flattering and humbling, but it was just like, I just always say I'm just a dude in the spare bedroom talking into a microphone.
Yeah, but so this week I've been focusing at work on just kind of building my LinkedIn connections. I think is what they call them on LinkedIn. And so I have a group that we've built, a couple thousand people that we've built over the last 5 years on LinkedIn. And I realized I didn't follow them all, so I should, because that's why they joined the group, and we should be first party connections. So I've been going in, and LinkedIn has some limitations. I think you can do 100 in a day or something like that, and then they kind of cut you off. And so I've been going in doing 75, 80 a day, just kind of. But because of that, I've been getting some notes back on LinkedIn from them, from people like, "Hey, thanks for the connection." And I think every other one or 2 out of 3 is like, "Hey, thanks for the connection. Love listening to the podcasts." And you're like, "Wow!" And you get one, and you're like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." But then you get 2 or 5 or 10 over the course of a day, and you're like, holy crap, people are actually listening to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's a significant, we see it in our numbers, but it's different when you look at your stats. This is why I always say that audience, or the real mark of your numbers, is your engagement numbers, like how many emails and stuff you get back. That's really the meaningful piece on that. And so it's been reinforcing on some of the things we're doing to say, yeah, people are listening to it, because I'm getting real live people to say that. I don't follow them and say, hey, give me feedback on the podcast. I just follow them. I definitely do not spam them back the second they follow me. LinkedIn people, stop doing that. Stop spamming me with your sales stuff the second I follow you, or the second
I hate that. It's a bot. And it's like, hey, thanks so much for following. Let's connect. Here's my book. And I'm like, and I immediately, what do you do when that happens?
Oh, they're gone.
Yeah. I immediately go, and we're out. Yeah.
And disconnect. And sometimes I'll reply back with, oh, maybe you want to buy this from me. I reply back with a sales pitch, and then I get a, and I'm like, well, okay. Obviously but back to the original point. Yeah, Dave, it's terribly satisfying when you reach, and I've been doing 75 people a day, and I probably get 20 notes back saying, hey, thanks for your podcast.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, okay, all right. And I always thank them. Like, hey, thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Andrea says, this is why it's so important to understand that what you're saying and doing in our podcasts and live shows, content in general, does influence people. We have a big response. The one that really blew me away, that I go, ooh, okay, is I had a client, I had a, consulting guy, and I'm like, so he had it. I'm like, what's your idea? What's your podcast? I go, good. Do you have any equipment? He goes, oh, good. I'm like, what's your equipment? He goes, okay, I have a Zoom H6. I've got a high LPR 40, blah, 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 and a couple other things. And he goes, and I have a Rodecaster Pro. And I go, okay, are you going to be doing interviews out in the field? Is that why you have the H6? I'm like, why do you have an H6 and a Rodecaster? And he goes, oh, well, you said the Rodecaster was cool. And I was like, oh, like that dude just spent $600 on something he didn't need. And I was kind of like, hey, do you still have the receipt for that? Yeah. He's like, no, I can use them both. I'm like, because you kind of need one or the other. You don't, in most cases, you don't need both, unless you're going to do a bunch of portable stuff. And he's like, no, this is all over Squadcast. And I was
or
like,
your name is Bandrew. That
exactly.
Apparently you have to have everything if your name is Bandrew.
Yeah. So that
Ed Sullivan. Ed has a lot of microphones too, by the way. That guy, he is loaded on microphones for sure. I think he's trying to rival. I think every time Bandrew, I need more coffee. I think every time Bandrew recommends a beautiful sound of hot coffee. It's not as hot as it was at the beginning of the show, but I think he buys it. If Bandrew reviews it, he buys it.
He does. And on a rare occasion, he will have something that he'll go, hey, for the record, this was sent to me. But in almost all cases, he buys it because he wants to be able to talk about it openly and in, that whole 9 yards. I always tell people if they ship stuff to me to play with, I'm like, hey, you do realize if I don't like it, I'm going to say I don't like it. And I said, what I usually do is I say, I will give you, like, if you want, I can give you my negative feedback, and then you can choose, do you want this to go live? And most people, even if it's negative, and usually it's not, will say, yeah, go ahead. Because it's one of those, even bad publicity is still publicity. So what are we looking at, Jim?
Well, there you go, Dave. Congratulations on the week of this week in technology category. School of Podcasting is the winner. Good work.
Yeah, that was that happened, and then
It's only because Home Gadget Geeks wasn't there. I held it out. I wanted to make sure you won.
But and then Ross was the guy, Live Stream Universe, to let me know. He's like, hey, your book is number one. I go, number one? I go, in what? And he's like, oh, you're number one. You're the number one new release in blogging. And I'm like, I will take that. But it was just still, again, it was like, and I went over and looked at my show and I was like, all right, it is. It says right there. I have a screenshot. It says it was the number one new release. So all I got to do now is figure out how to paint and record an audiobook at the same time. So
just wait.
Yeah, that's it.
Just wait on it. Let the print copy go through. You need to take some time anyways. And then through the holidays, when you have some time, just do it.
Yeah, I actually listened to Pat Flynn, did a whole thing. Pat Flynn has been doing a daily video show since COVID started. Like he's on day like 143, and he did one on audiobooks, and he said that because it takes a while to get your audiobook approved and everything like that. And he said he released, I want to say Superfans, and he goes, what that actually does, he goes, you kind of don't, like, he didn't do it on purpose. He goes, but because there was he goes, you actually get to do a double launch. And what he did is what I'm going to do. I'm only 2 chapters in. I'm already throwing in bonus content. Is he threw in stuff so that if you did buy the audiobook, you kind of don't feel like it's the exact same thing. You get bonus stuff. So.
Yeah, you know what, Dave? There could be some opportunities to turn this. So instead of sitting down, recording the whole thing, and releasing it that way, think about recording a chapter a week and releasing it as a podcast first, so people can come in, or make it available. Do the reverse order. In other words, the book's cheaper, or the audio version is cheaper the earlier you buy it. So maybe it starts at $2, and then chapter it goes $1 a chapter till you get it done, and then when you're done, you've got the whole thing, and you're not under pressure to sit down and crank that thing out in one sitting, right? Gives you some time.
The thing that's weird is I don't have any control over the physical book, and from what I was told, because the book, I'm not going to say the publisher, because like they still owe me for the second half of the book, so I'm not going to say anything negative about my publisher, because I love them to pieces. But they're distributed through Simon & Schuster, which is kind of cool. And what they told me is Simon & Schuster shipped the books to Amazon, and Amazon was like, no. And I don't know what they said, some metadata. And there's a part of me that kind of goes, like, aren't you a publisher? Shouldn't you know how to fill out the forms right? But that's why the book is not at Amazon right now in a physical format. It's available via Kindle, and they say they are working on it, and it should be there soon. But I was kind of like, I worked really hard to get people to order this thing. And like David Hooper from, Big Podcast, he's got 2 notices now. And it's usually like one a month, like, hey, we're having a hard time ordering this. Do you still want it? And that kills me that I'm like, I'm one click away from a no. And I was like, yes, okay. I know it's COVID, but holy cow.
Well, I'm going to be transparent with you, Dave. I felt like this was getting a little weird on Amazon. And so even though it was cheaper, I canceled my actual book purchase because I had the physical copy. Yeah. Waiting to see what was kind of happening, because I thought maybe you'd got scammed on this thing. Like, something, because it just felt the way they were talking about it in the email. I was like, I think I bought it when it was $13 and it's $16.99 today. And it'll probably,
is it really?
Yeah. I think it'll drop again, right? As soon as they're available, whatever. But, it is, I just kind of thought, well, I'm going to just kind of wait and see when these actually become, because I definitely want the physical copy, because I want to put it on on the new books that I've bought that I never intend to read, right there in that section. I'll read it. Don't get me wrong. But that is I bought books I've bought and haven't read yet. Maybe that's the way I should say.
I have a pile of those. Yeah. Do you have 2 Amazon shows behind you? What's
Amazon? No. So this is a Surface RT, Microsoft Surface RT from way back in the day. This is a Surface Pro 3 that is sitting back there, and then of course this is just a regular TV that's got Chromecast on it. So yeah.
Miss Eileen says I have 2 copies of Superfans because her daughter hijacked one, and Audible. I never look at the book. I looked at it long enough to go, oh, I can't wait to listen to this. Because I had him sign one at the military influencer conference.
When the book comes out, we ought to do a book review on Ask the Podcast Coach. Like, we don't have to do the whole book, but we could, like, when we can get physical copies of it, you and I should do a Saturday where we kind of
Oh.
maybe I interview you and we hit the highlights of it.
Here's the
Why
fun
wouldn't
one.
we do that?
I've had at least 4 people, which is cool because that means they bought the book and they're all freaking out because they're like going, please tell me what should I buy for what'd you call it? The lottery. In the opening chapter, it says one last thing. As I write this, it's February 2020. Things may change by the time you read this. Please keep that in mind. And they're like, did you know? And I'm like, yeah, I knew there was going to be a pandemic. I knew, but everybody's like, that's a very, very good line there. So
yeah, I think you should podcast the audio version of this thing or release it in chapters and do some other things with it.
If you want the
rights,
old,
right?
I do have the rights, which I'm slowly finding out by the time you get into Audible, there's not much left to chew on, but that's the joy of working with a giant company. But
don't you think like the value in the Audible or the audio version is could be, instead of trying to sell it, it could be in driving business back to you as a consultant?
It could be.
I'd lean that way. I'd lean it as a loss leader for your consulting and then build a podcast around it. That'd be my choice.
It's really just going to be like an 8-hour or however long it takes to read podcast. Yeah. And I started off like in chapter 1, I said, here's the deal. I'm going to read this just like I'm going to treat this like a podcast. Mm-hmm. I said, so I'm going to read the book and make it sound like I'm not reading. I said, and you will hear me occasionally go off script because, well, it's just you and me, and let's just keep it easy peasy and go from there. So,
although be careful, you could go off script a lot and turn that into a 55-hour Audible.
Yeah, thing, I have to have some. Yeah. My favorite that kind of inspired it was Gary V's Crush It. He's almost off script more than he is on script.
Yeah.
And that's it was weird because it almost got distracting because you were really listening for him to go, okay, hold on a second. That's not true anymore or whatever. So it was really, you were just waiting for that to where when he was actually reading the book, you're like, okay, blah, 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 blah. So according to Kyle, he says, waiting for my copy from Amazon. They're saying it will be arriving October 5th through October 20th. Well, that's like 2 days from now. So
that's also a pretty broad.
Yeah, I did have somebody.
I'll buy it as soon as there's copies and we have copies in the wild. I'll go back out and order it.
Well, the other thing that I said to my publisher in a very kind word, I said, okay, that explains, he said in quotation marks, why they're not in Amazon. I go, what happened to the copies that were supposed to be sent to me? And I said, because you guys said, about a month ago that I wasn't going to get them early. Fine. But trust me, metadata or not, I would gladly accept them because I wanted to send. There are a bunch of people mentioned in the book, and I wanted to, sign a little note and ship them one just to say thanks for being interviewed and contributing to the book and that whole 9 yards. So, it's going to be fun. But it's actually Andres, says you are recording. You can go off script and edit. Yeah, what I'm doing with edits, because it's so much harder than you think it is to A, read a book and make sure it doesn't sound like you're reading it, and B, get your own words to come out of your mouth. So what I've just been doing is editing as I do it, which is why it takes a little longer. So if I, in the middle, mess up, I will pause 10 seconds and then read to the end of the paragraph or something, and then go back and fix that edit. And it's not that hard. It's just time consuming, and it's, that whole 9 yards. But the other thing I think about is I do need to kind of get a hop on this because I don't want to record the first half of this book in the apartment and the second half in the house. Because I was at the house. The house right now has no carpet in it except for one room. And I'm in the room and I'm like, I got to get some carpet in here. That's not going to work. So, but it'll be fun. I actually bought a thing. I can't remember the name of it on AppSumo that is designed for private podcasts. And I thought what I might do is for to use Pat Flynn's terms, my super fans, I might sell it to them first on that platform. Now they have to download an app to get it. That's the thing. I'm like, but it's super secure. They can't share it and they can't blah, blah, blah. And that way those people would buy whatever, the amount is. And I would get a big chunk of that money and then once those people have bought it, put it on Audible, and that wouldn't be a long period, maybe a month, then put it on Audible and just let them take their percent and go, all right, well, look, it's on Audible. Yay. So, which is good. It'd be fun.
Though, but could you also, if they bought the book and you would give them the audio version, if they bought the physical copy of the book, would you say, hey, send me a picture of the book, like with your, and I'll give you the audio version for free? Because it would drive just
people to buy the book,
because nobody's listening at this point, and we're not influencers, but it would drive people to buy the book, and the Amazon exposure could be worth more than what you get as far as you get to keep more of the audio sales than you would the book sales, right? Because there's somebody else involved. But driving Amazon numbers may be more, maybe not, maybe more important, because it's just between you and me. Maybe more important.
Nobody's listening.
Yeah. Just saying. I'm just saying that maybe another strategy to say, no, actually, I'd like you to have it. And if you bought the book, I'll give you the audio version, because since you control it, I'll give you the audio version for free, or whatever, 99 cents. Might be 99 cents, maybe a better price. I don't know. Chat room. Would you buy Dave's book? And if you could upgrade to the audio version for 99 cents, deal? Would you do it? Yes or no?
I would think so.
Tell me in the chat room, yes or no. Like to know if that's how that would work. I actually think 99 cents is better than free, to be honest, just because it ascribes some value to it. Gary says deal. Dave says yes, I would. All right, so that's good. Yeah. Yep. I would. I'd do it for sure, Dave. So I think that's something to think about.
Kyle says, I read Dave's last book with his voice in my head. That is bizarre. I did the same thing. When I start to read Pat Flynn's books, I'm like, I hear the voice of Pat Flynn in my head.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, 99 cents helps cover the overhead of the whatever you're going to use to do this. And then have it available just as audio have you thought about how much you're going to sell that for, the audio version?
I would have to look at what people are selling it for on Audible. That's the thing I always thought was interesting, because that's what makes Audible. It's like a book on Audible is they used to be, let me see here. Because I remember when you could go into like Barnes and Noble. Remember bookstores? Oh, went there was fun. Mariah
remember
Carey
stores?
Remember stores in general. Okay, so
store in a while.
Yeah, they still are. They're about $25 for the audiobook.
Yeah.
So
what I've discovered? I'm way better at selling your stuff than I am mine. I'm a way better hype man for you than I am for me. I need to work on that a little bit. Yeah, I would think $9.99 might be the right, or $14.99 might be the right price in there if they haven't bought the book, because that way the audiobook would compete with the print version, and if you make it too cheap, they'll buy the audio version. So maybe you make it match the book to say, well, if you buy the book, the audio upgrade is just 99 cents, and then you sell both at that point.
Matthew McConaughey has all right. He has a book out.
Well, and Gary says, I like having the audio book and the paperback to write notes in. And so that's a good point of why you might want to be able to have a easy way for people to have both. And there's completists out there sometimes too, just want a copy of everything.
Everything.
They just want it all.
Well, that's what I do. I buy the audiobook. It's weird. I listen to the audiobook, and when I go in Audible, I will make a bookmark for it. I will then go into the Kindle version and put the same bookmark there and highlight it. It's kind of weird. Let me see here. Here is a book by Jackie Martling. Okay, his book is $14. So basically you can set your price. It's anywhere from 14. I've seen everywhere from 14 to 25 for Mariah Carey. So
the other thing I've seen on this book, and we kind of did this a little bit at Gallup, and I think it's a good idea. If it's the book's instructional, you release the book, and then you can put out, and they kind of alluded to this in the chat room, you can put out your own workbook pages or PDFs Then there's some kind of things you can do to like get people to subscribe, and you get the free workbook that's a companion guide to the book type thing. You know?
If you buy the book, there's a super secret link that leads you to an email list that will have more stuff in the future. Because I wanted,
right.
And again, I just stole that right out of the Pat Flynn Page book. Because I wanted a way to interact with people that bought the book.
Yeah.
And not just people that bought the book, the people that actually went to the super secret link, so that
super secret link is in the book.
It's in the book.
Okay.
You have to buy the book to get the super secret link. And then that lets me know that you're engaged because you didn't, so, and then that will be.
You actually read the book.
Yeah.
Right?
And you actually read the book.
Yeah.
But that will allow me to, because it's a book on technology, that now is a year old already. The book is already a year old. And so there's a thing at the end with tools. Here's some of the tools and here's what they do. And I'm like, that's going to change.
Yeah.
In fact, I had one, luckily, and I'm hoping they did this. Glow.fm was listed in the book. Well, from the time I wrote it to the time it came out, they completely changed their target audience. They went from, here's a cool thing to sell private podcast, blah, blah, blah. It's X amount of money per user. It was like 55 cents a user plus a percentage, yada, yada. Now they're like $300 a month. And I went, love the people at Glow. That's not who's reading this book. This is not an enterprise solution kind of audience. And I just was like, and then I forget who I put in their place, but I was really happy because I emailed my publisher and said, hey, I realized, because they sent me like the 5th draft of it. And I was like, they were like, this is kind of the final one. I'm like, can we put in a paragraph and take that one out? And they were like, yeah, as long as we, they'll have to make sure it's cool and things like that. So, Gary says, I loved what Malcolm Gladwell did with his audiobook for Talk to Strangers, where he had the characters in their own words as a musical theme throughout. Yeah. I think, if I were to do this again, I would have recorded the interviews for reels, for lack of a better phrase. Like I was just putting my phone down, and the audio is horrible for most of these. If I did, and then I could have used those interviews in the book, and I didn't. So, and most of them were Zoom calls and things like that. So
you could since it's been a year, you could actually use that as an opportunity to go back and re-record the interviews, not word for word, but get an update from those guests, right? And include that in, since it's been a year. I mean, how great would that be? Like, who was one of your
there's a Jonathan Oakes from Trivia Warfare is a guy that I just picked his brain to death on his Patreon, because he's got a whole thing over that.
It's changed on Patreon, right? So it'd be good to get an audio update from him on that.
Yeah, and then Mark Bologna at Beyond Bourbon Street. It would be interesting to see, because there's a guy that one of his sponsors was a walking tour, and if people aren't traveling to New Orleans, how does that affect your podcast?
Right.
So it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. You could even, I mean, you could even, that you need another podcast, but you could even create a feed of updates that maybe once a month or whatever, as things change.
Yeah.
You could record some things, that say, hey, I talked about this in the book, but here's an update. Because, over the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to change. That could be its own feed that you would give to, your super secret email list to say, hey, if you want to stay up to date, I'll do a monthly update on, and just a good way to keep them engaged, right? I'd listen to that for sure. It would make me want to read the book.
Yeah, there is something that's not in the book because it didn't exist yet that I'm doing, and I'm not going to say the name just yet because I still kind of wanted to do it organically. But there's a show I'm doing that I found a product that I like, and I made a podcast for the people that should be using that product and use them as a sponsor, and it's an affiliate. And I'm already making a couple $100 with that podcast, and I've got like 3 episodes out. And I was like, I think I found something. So that might be an idea. If, again, it's something I'm somewhat passionate about, because that's just always going to not work.
Yeah.
If you're forcing yourself. I did have that question. Somebody asked, I think that was in Facebook, was how do you know when to quit? And I'm like, if you're approaching the mic going,
with dread,
I don't want to do this.
Fear
I'm
and
like,
trepidation.
yeah, then don't.
Yeah,
I'm like,
no.
it's just, that's when
Although,
the
Dave,
thrill is gone.
although, okay,
Yeah.
let me put an asterisk there.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you got to push through that, because I think sometimes you get to a point where you're there and you quit too soon. Like
Yeah.
you need, there are times you just need to push through that and say, let me just muscle through this thing. I'd make it maybe even a little more extreme to say, like, if I'm losing sleep, if it's causing me health issues, if I'm having mental health or anxiety issues, okay, that's a definite sign, time to stop. If it's just like I don't feel like it, well, okay, sometimes I don't feel like making my bed, but that's probably a bad example because I never make my bed. But there's just some times that I don't feel like doing things. You just need to muscle through it and get it done. So I wouldn't quit too early.
Yeah. I know once I had one where I took a break. I said, I'm going to take a couple weeks. I'll be right back in 3 weeks, thinking that if I took a break, I would either A, find more content, or B, be refreshed. And after 3 weeks, I was like, I still don't want to do this.
Yeah. Well, but you still need to muscle through one more.
Yeah.
Because you made a promise, right? You're like, hey, I'll be back in 3 weeks.
Exactly.
Muscle through it, get one done, even if it's short, get out there. Hey, and be honest. I thought this was going to work and it didn't. I appreciate you guys listening. This is going to be the last one that we're going to do. Thanks for coming out. Let me give you some creative, let me give you some recommendations and some other people to listen to.
Yeah. And here's where I'm going. If let them follow you over there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's Mystic says here, I've bought a book and then they check the links in the books and they're closed. Well, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. Well,
but at least for 10 years, I would think.
If you gather that audience, though, you got a chance to kind of keep them up to date. Gary Stockton says sometimes pushing through is where those creative breakthroughs come. And I agree. I think sometimes quitting is the best thing to happen. Don't quit permanently. Let your brain rest for a moment. And then all of a sudden, this has probably happened to me half a dozen times where I'm like, you know what? I'm done with Home Gadget Geeks. I've done 400 of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. I'm done. And then you just let yourself quit for a second. And all of a sudden you start to get this flow of, well, if I'm quitting, maybe I could do things differently. Maybe I could, maybe it doesn't have to be this way. Maybe I could, whatever. And so to Gary's point, I think sometimes that starts the creative juices you just need to let yourself quit to come back.
Well, and sometimes it's weird, but the pressure of doing the episode stifles your creativity. I learned this. I had really bad test anxiety. And it was one of those things that I discovered it way late in my college. Like my first degree, I was like a C/B student. When I went back, knowing I had test anxiety, I got almost straight A's. And what I did, it sounded so woo-woo that I was like, there's no way this works. But I knew the answer. I knew the answer. I did all my homework, and there was I already had a pretty good grade on the test. I was pretty confident in it. But there were like 2 questions that I'm like, man, I know this. And I remember there was a book. It said, what you need to do is close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and as clear as you can in your mind, picture yourself getting up, taking the test, putting it on the desk, putting your hand on the doorknob, turning it, and leaving and walking down the hall. Just as clear as you can, put the test behind you. And the minute I did, and really threw out all my doubt and just, let's do this. And the minute I started walking down the hall, well, I'm like, oh, it's C. It's like, because the pressure of I want to get a good grade. And it's like the minute I kind of turned it off, you kind of just, so that's kind of, I think maybe what you're talking about there is when you kind of go, you know what if I don't want to do it this way? What if I do it, take the pressure out? Yeah.
Yeah. Or reset my goals. What are my expectations? Where am I going with this? Where do I think I want to go? Mystic Mac says, you don't want to burn out. And I think there's this fine line in between, when I was training to run marathons, Dave, I ran a long way. I felt like Forrest Gump. I ran for a long time.
Run, Jim, run.
I could never do the marathon if I didn't push myself to train and burn out, so to speak. You have to be careful. I don't want to encourage people, there's mental health things going on here. So you decide. But pushing yourself hard in a training sense. I think also applies in this sense that there are times you also need to recover, right? I couldn't push myself hard 7 days a week for 5 months. I had to take some breaks in there too, but I had the goal in mind. So I don't get to a point where you're winded. Like you need to be sore, right? You need to have something to recover from. Certainly don't burn out, but don't quit just as it starts to get interesting. Don't quit when you're really starting to make some progress. Yeah. It's going to hurt.
Well, Craig has a good point. He goes, this is another reason to have 2 or 3 in the can.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would say, and it was really interesting because I realized it as I was in the middle of it, and I'm going to talk about painting, but this does apply to podcasting. And that is like right out of the gate. I jump in, guy comes in, destroys my bathroom. And I'm like, hey, when do I give you my credit card? And he's like, I don't take credit cards. And I was like, oh, lesson number 1, always ask the contractor, do you take credit cards? Like, this is how you learn. And then I was like, I'm going to have to juggle some bank accounts around to get this guy paid, blah, blah, blah. But once that was, and you know what? I kind of was like, okay, it's going to be a little different, but that's okay. And even then moving forward, there were, number 1, you're watching a house that you grew up in transform into something that's not how it used to be. And I was like, wow, check this out. I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing with spackle. And I was just like, oh wow, this is what it's like to be out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And I know that, and I acknowledge that I'm not comfortable. Everybody keeps thinking I got married. I did not get married. This is the Aura ring, and it tracks my temperature and my heart rate and a bunch of other things. And it's funny because I pushed it really hard yesterday. I woke up today and it said, hey, you're tired. And I'm like, really? No kidding. It's like, you might want to take it easy today. And I'm like, nope, going to go paint for 10 hours. But it was saying my heart rate was going up. Like even when I was sleeping, it's like your resting heartbeat has gone up. Like what's going on? I'm like, well, it's called stress. And so when you realize that, that's when you're like, okay, I am uncomfortable. This is not going to last forever. And I'm already, the minute like the first wall of the living room got painted, I was like, ooh, this is going to look cool with the carpet. And you start to kind of chill out. So realize that in some cases, you may want to quit because you're just not comfortable where you're at.
Yeah. Only you decide, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? We can give advice, but you have to decide what you're comfortable with and where it's at. And don't let anybody tell you that. You need to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
all right, that's it.
Another episode.
Another one in the can. Yeah. Episode 313 is
getting close next week here, but then the week after that, we're doing it live from the Toscano Studio 21 in New Hampshire. So it'll be fun. Well, you'll be there. I'll be there.
I'll be here. Yeah.
Headset Ed producing. It's going to be super fun.
It is going to. Wait till you see that place.
I know.
It's cool, man.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what they're doing and the way they got the studio set up and some of those kinds of things.
And then Dave, the guy that runs it, just, man, you're going to have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, he's just, pull a string and let him start telling stories, man.
It's going to be great.
He's a good guy.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing Ed too, hanging out with Ed for the day. So socially distanced. By
right.
the way,
do you like Chinese food?
Oh, I love Chinese food.
Oh, yeah. Ed's got a place. Okay. Nice. It was good. Yeah.
Good. I'll make sure we hit it. All right. And I'm going to see you, right? Luigi's on the way back.
So, 22nd.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So,
all right.
All right, guys.
See you guys. Take care.
Thank you so much. We'll see you.
See you.
Bye-bye.